Hello, I'm Michael Howe with Gluware. In this video, we're going to take a quick look at how Gluware has introduced support for automating SONiC. If you're not familiar, you might be wondering, well, what is SONiC? Well, SONiC is an open source networking operating system that's based on Linux, that runs on switches from multiple vendors and ASICs like Broadcom, NVIDIA, Barefoot, and others. So it offers a full suite of functionality, including routing protocols like BGP, and it has been hardened in data centers and runs in some of the largest cloud service providers in the world. So SONiC enables operators to share the same software stack across hardware from different switch vendors, and currently that list is over 100 different platforms that are supported. So Microsoft originally developed SONiC for its Azure data center, but in 2022, Microsoft ceded oversight of the project to the Linux Foundation. So for more information about SONiC, you can visit sonicfoundation.dev. SONiC is gaining momentum, and several Gluware customers have now deployed SONiC and have requested support for automation, and so therefore we are introducing it. Little known fact, SONiC is actually an acronym. It stands for Software for Open Networking in the Cloud. So with that, let's cover one quick slide and then move on to the demonstration. So Gluware's initial support here introduces two flavors of the software, both the SONiC Community Edition. So this is the general edition, the so-called open source version that is available to run on different switching platforms. We also have introduced support for one vendor's their own distribution, which is the Dell Enterprise SONiC Edition. So with that, we've introduced several of the Gluware applications as part of our suite to support that, which we're going to be covering. So the first app is Device Manager. So in Device Manager, we'll take a look at this in the live demo, but you can execute network discoveries, device discovery, ad hoc queries, reboots, searches, and other functions. So for users of Gluware, this is our multi-vendor solution. Device Manager is kind of generally where you start, where you're doing your initial discovery, and SONiC is fully supported there. In addition, our app Config, Drift and Audit fully supports SONiC. So you can, with Drift, you can see exactly what has changed in a config by Gluware taking snapshots and enabling users to compare those snapshots. And you can do other things like be notified on it and do other advanced things when you tie it to things like network RPA. With the audit capability, you can easily build no-code audits and execute those audits to ensure your configurations are meeting your audit requirements. Audit and Drift also can be expanded using custom capture commands. So these users can define, when Gluware is executing discovery, we run a series of commands. We are capturing the configuration, but in addition, you can specify specific commands to capture in snapshot that can be used for audit and Drift that includes state information. So the screenshot here is just showing you a quick snapshot of what a config drift looks like, where certain lines were removed, other lines were added, and with the timestamps, and you can see exactly what has changed in those configs using config drift. The next app is Topology. So Topology for us, it enables really that layer 0 through layer 3 view of your network topology. So it's good for visualization. It's also good for generating site documentation. So SONiC is now one of the vendors supported in the Topology app. And Network RPA. Network RPA is our drag and drop process automation application. This is where you're kind of deconstructing components of the other apps, like maybe you want to take a snapshot or reboot a device or run a drift, and if drift occurred, maybe you want to do another, maybe also run an audit. So you can stitch together many different tasks into an end-to-end process, tie together third-party integrations like ServiceNow or Netbox, and really kind of build out your end-to-end automation. So with that, let's switch over to the UI. Okay, so here we are in the Gluware user interface, and I'm going to just run you through a quick demo of how SONiC now looks within the Gluware application suite. Here we are in Gluware Control, and I am accessing an on-prem system here, and I've navigated into an org that has all the devices that I'm managing. So just kind of running through the apps here, we're in the dashboard app. So I have a dashboard app here, and I'll just show you really quickly how SONiC appears here. If I were to scroll over in my device grid and look at my vendors, I see my SONiC device here in my device grid. It's getting counted. If I scroll down here into my devices by vendor, I can see a breakdown of all the different devices in this particular instance. And I do only have one SONiC device, but you do get a breakdown. And, let's say you're in a project where you're migrating away from a legacy vendor towards running SONiC, you could keep track of all those things in a dashboard like this. Moving on, let's jump into Device Manager and navigate into the device view. So this is all the data that was being used to feed into those widgets that you were seeing in the dashboard app. Basically here in Device Manager, any user of Gluware is in this app a lot. This is where you're browsing your inventory. These are the devices under management. In this case, all of these devices here, Gluware has performed a device discovery. So I'll just scroll down and quickly show you that the SONiC device is already in this inventory. But once something is in the inventory, you get features like search. So I could have just searched for SONiC and it'll show me the SONiC devices in this. Gluware is also snapshotting that running configuration. So if I was searching for something like a Google search for something within my config, like a NTP server or a given, VRF or whatever it might be, I could put that string in here and it would identify the device that has that, and I could double click in and look at that. So just wanted to highlight that the normal, let's say, grid functionality of Device Explorer, by looking at all your devices, filter, search, sort are all fully supported. Now let's go through some more functionality that is here in Device Manager. One of those functions is network discovery. So I'm going to flip the view over to network discovery, and I've built a network discovery plan just to show you that when we discover the network, you can do it in two methods. You can either give Gluware a seeded device and we'll look at the device and start looking at the neighbors and go through the network using things like ARP and LLDP or CDP. We also can do a subnet scan. So we're looking at this, looking at a subnet scan range and then querying those IPs and then ultimately looking to SSH in and discover what those devices are. So both methods are supported. I ran this test already. I used the neighbor crawl with the seeded instance, and I can look at my results. So it ran complete, discovered 2 devices and 2 errors. We'll look at that, and I can jump into the summary view here. So basically, when looking at a network discovery, Gluware looks at the ARP and LLDP entries and has identified these neighbors. Then Gluware looks to log into those neighbors. So if we don't have credentials, like this is a lab infrastructure router, I know that. This is a host, so Gluware is not able to log into those. So that's why you may see sometimes errors. Those are generally known in terms of when you're running your discovery. But one of the LLDP neighbors it did detect here was the Juniper device, and that is already in our inventory here. So just an example where you can certainly run network discovery, and when SONiC devices are part of the network, Gluware will discover them, again, either through the neighbor call method or the subnet scan method. So let's navigate back into our device view here, and we can close out this top panel. So just diving a bit further with the SONiC device, let me double click on it and talk a little bit about the elements that you have across the top here. So first, when you're double clicked into a device and that device tab is open here, on the device information view here, the device details, I can scroll down and look at all the information. So here is the connection information. So we're using SSH to this IP with our credentials from our credential store. This is not the actual credential. We are referencing something from the credential store here. If I scroll down here, you're going to see different settings within Gluware, like management state, production, in the environment it's in, any custom fields that we're configuring or defining. Then we're going to start to get into some of the information that is actually discovered through device discovery. So we discovered its vendor SONiC. When we discovered a Dell Enterprise SONiC, the vendor would be Dell. Dell, and then it's Dell Enterprise SONiC, and then the OS is SONiC. Here's the OS version, here's the serial number, the SKU, this is the uptime. So we're collecting all that information into the Gluware database that users can use to generate out inventory reports or whatever lifecycle management things you're looking at. You could, be watching things like the uptime and get flagged if an uptime is less than a certain amount, flagging it, maybe a device got rebooted or something like that. So not too much more to cover there. Just know that you have full details there. Next is the audit summary view. I do have an audit configured and run, so it's giving me my total in terms of my audit and that no violations occurred. We're going to take a look at an audit in just a few minutes here. When you navigate to advisory summary, currently NIST does not yet have NVDs or vulnerability disclosures related to SONiC. So it's not yet a operating system that NIST is collecting that information. Hopefully that gets added, and then it would be added within Gluware as well. The next view here is a configuration snapshot. So what you're seeing here in this view for, again, standard with all the devices in the inventory, as part of the discovery, we are capturing the current running config. So you can browse through this configuration, and I'll just browse down to the end here. Just looking at all the Ethernet interfaces. And then the SNMP community string, that SNMP. So that's the end of the config. And then we have expanded or done the custom capture commands. And one of the custom capture commands added here is a show VLAN brief. So users can define this in settings. You can add additional commands to capture as part of the snapshot. So we're capturing the show VLAN brief, and then here is the output of that command. So any commands you add to your custom snapshot, you will get a snapshot. Then again, we can use that information in Drift and Audit. So that is the configuration view. And then finally on the top view, you have your activities view. So all the activities run here, you're going to have detailed logging of the exact interactions, and we're going to take a look at that in a minute here. So back to the Device Explorer view, across the views, we've already looked at the network discovery and how you can run that. This icon here is how you run a new device discovery. So we've already discovered this device, and those details have been captured. But if I highlight one or more devices in the Gluware UI and if I execute a discovery, and I can kind of scroll over because we do have a field or a flag that discovery is running here. So discover status, it's running. And then what I want to highlight here is up in the log view. If you open this at the same time and double click in, you're going to get a real-time view of exactly what's happening in that interaction. So a real benefit of Gluware is that we have the dial layer, the device interaction and automation layer. So Gluware natively onboards the integration with the devices, meaning we taught our engine how to speak SONiC, so the CLI and semantic required. We've also onboarded it into applications like this, where it's running a series of commands to extract out that data that it needs, version information, uptime information. Right there, it's getting the running config. So you can see, roughly 2,500 lines of config it ran, and that was a fully automated capture. So just diving into it a little bit is that the log is very detailed, and I think users really appreciate this because they see exactly what Gluware is doing. We're executing a show version. We then get that output from the device. We're able to parse through that and pull out any information that users want to surface, like, for example, in the Device Explorer grid. And you can just look through all that information. So show uptime, so show, or like host name, we're capturing the host name, show feature status, and on and on. So again, you get very detailed information through looking at the logs and seeing how Gluware is capturing that device discovery. And that log view is always available in real time. You don't have to turn on a debugging mode or something like that. So moving across, and we can shut down this view now. Just across here, the only other thing I'd mention from an actions view is you can highlight the device and execute a reload, a reboot of the device if that is something you need to do. There are obviously reasons to reboot. Sometimes when executing certain changes or upgrading or running through certain configuration changes, there are reasons to reboot. Sometimes it's just a workaround to a flaw in the software. So that's supported as well. That pretty much covers Device Explorer. Let's jump down into Config, Drift, and Audit and navigate into the device view. So again, in the lower part of the pane, the window here, we have all our devices. And again, anytime you need to find a device, you can always search, you can always sort by OS. So here's a SONiC device. I'm going to double click on it. And through double clicking on it, it brings up different views here. But basically, since we're in Drift, this view here gives me a side-by-side view of the different snapshots. So back on the 8th, this config was determined to be the favorite or the standard. You can mark a config your default config. And once it's marked as the default, that will be the snapshot that subsequent snapshots are compared to. So if we look over on the right-hand side, here's a snapshot from the 13th, which is today. And I can see that someone was in here, removed an interface. I think basically there was some tweaking going on where moved an interface from layer 3 to layer 2. And they removed a trunk configuration, added a VLAN configuration. So if I was trying to troubleshoot something wrong and I didn't know what changed, Drift is priceless for that because you can identify exactly what changed. And then generally, either through RPA or through scheduling your drifts, you're running this within a 24-hour period, and you can really kind of pinpoint when that may have occurred. So that's very useful in terms of just seeing your side-by-side comparison, and you're going to get this icon saying like that drift has occurred. You get this notification here. All right, let's quickly move on into audit. So I'm going to navigate over into my Audit Policy Explorer, and I'm going to double click on an audit that's already built here. And let's take a look at this audit because I just want to give you a feel for how you build an audit with Gluware and in SONiC. It is quite straightforward and it's virtually the same as really any other device. The only thing to note when I was working with it, the only thing to note is that there can be sections of configuration that you don't want to indicate you're configuring regex. The banner is a good example because there's characters in here like /n and others that are regex. And so when you're using something like banner and you want to make sure that this banner is configured, you cannot must contain with regex because Gluware is going to flag that as invalid regex format. So we are looking at your rule and determining if you have valid regex configured. If you're saying it has regex in it, we start looking at it and you have things that don't make sense, it's going to fail a validation. So all you do is leave this as must contain, and this banner, which again is just copy and pasted right from the configuration, this is a required banner. So if we go down to the second rule here, this is, let me give us a little more real estate here. Here is configuration for the BGP globals. So, or the BGP feature. So this is not on the per peer stuff, but here is right from the configuration, auto restart enabled, checkup status false. Like if these are your parameters and you want to ensure that this is your standard, that's how you do it. So really, in summary, if I look back at my audit, all I do is add rules, copy and paste the section of config that I want. You can use regex to like remove out or wildcard things like IP addresses or VLANs or whatever, if it's more generalized. But basically, just like any other usage of it, you're you can build out your audits. And again, you're auditing the snapshot. So that snapshot can include, it always will include the configuration snapshot, but it can include any additional custom capture commands that you may have configured. So that's pretty much it on audit in terms of a quick flyby and just building your audits, running your audits. Running audits is very easy. Let's navigate over to the device view, the device explorer view. And then from here, I will select my SONiC device, which is, I'll just click on it here to select it. Can do a multi-select if I wanted, but in this case, it is a SONiC specific audit, so I will only be auditing that. So I select my SONiC device, and then I just execute an audit configuration. And then it says, what policy do I want to run against it? And I'm going to run the SONiC test. So I can schedule this, I can start it. I also can run an audit from RPA in terms of building out a process automation, but I'm going to run this right away here. You're going to see it runs very fast because the default is to run from the snapshot already collected. So this is great because you don't necessarily have to go collect the configuration again. Gluware has already done that. And so it executed here with no errors. I can click view results and navigates me into the results where no violations have been found. And I can go further into the runs as well, because every time you run it, you have your actions and your logs and everything. So really standard in terms of support for config, drift, and audit within the Gluware app suite. The last app I'll touch on quickly, just because it's one of the newer apps, is let's navigate into Topology here. And this is a lab network, so the majority of things aren't connected. I do want to do a little editing of labels here. So let's add on the OS serial number and the SKU. And then let's add on the MAC and the IP. And let's do the status as well, and hit save. All right, so here's all my devices in my lab. So if I do a search, it's going to find my device here. So just to show you a little bit more information, I'll select this device and click on the information panel. So one thing you'll notice is that while the device rendered in Topology, it's not connected. Basically, the devices that are connected to this aren't currently under the same administration. So I don't have the ability to render that based on our lab configuration right now. This is obviously not typical, but I did just want to show that you will see the device render, and generally the connections would render. Again, a lot of devices in this lab are just basically devices on a stick, essentially not truly networked to other devices. So, but by double clicking on it, you can see here all the data collected. So when you are looking at, and again, most implementations of SONiC are in data centers or are in campuses, and that does require maintaining site diagrams. So you can, get this the way you want it and then export your view in a PDF or a Visio, and, it can accelerate you on maintaining valid network documentation. So that concludes the kind of quick demo and highlight of the new support added here in Gluware. One thing to finish with is, let me switch back over to the slides. So just to quickly wrap up here, I hope this was useful to you in seeing how Gluware has added support for SONiC. Again, both the Community Edition and the Dell Enterprise Edition. We didn't really get to show the Dell Enterprise Edition in this, but that same switch can basically run both versions. So we're able to switch between operating systems and have verified and onboarded both. I do want to mention that while this was delivered with, or this was developed in our release train for our 5.5 release, because new vendor support is package releasable, meaning we don't have to wait for a major feature increment or platform release. We actually released this today, November 13th of 2024, as a package delivery on top of 5.4. So if you're running 5.4, you can update the latest package and you will have support for the SONiC operating system. So that's it. Thanks very much for your time and attention.